Dr. Veronica Watson. I am a full professor at Indiana University of Pennsylvania, where I'm also the director of the Graduate Studies in Literature program, Literature and Criticism, and I'm also the convener of the Frederick Douglass Institute Collaborative of Pennsylvania State System of Higher Education. 23 years.
Wow, 23 years.
No one's more surprised than I am in many ways. About 26 years. So this was my first full-time job, and it's been my only full-time job.
Wow,
Well, I actually, when I was in college, I was pre-med. And I was at a liberal arts university, and they were all about us exploring ourselves and trying to figure out what was important to us. And so lots of philosophy classes, lots of English classes, lots of history classes. And somewhere along that way, I figured out that every time I thought about medicine, I thought about money. And I didn't want to live my life that way. And so I sort of started a journey. And maybe a year after I was starting to question whether pre-med was the direction I wanted to go, two things happened. One of those higher advanced math classes happened. That was a wake-up call.
Right.
And then one of my English professors said to me, "You'd be a great professor. Have you ever thought about it?" And I hadn't. I'm a first-generation college student. I was thinking I was doing good just to be in college, and it had never occurred to me to even wonder what my professors did or how they got where they were. And so when she said that, I really started kind of wondering. And in the parlance of the day, I just sort of changed my major and decided that, okay, this is the thing that I want to do. And I don't think I understood very much at all what was involved. But because one of my trusted faculty said that I would be good at it, I began to explore it. I think it was probably after I graduated with the doctorate degree.
Okay.
Because when I was in graduate school, the only reason for pursuing a PhD in English was that you wanted to be a college professor. So there really wasn't any opportunity or conversation about doing something else. Now, what I will say is that I always thought of the doctorate as being the thing that would open whatever door I wanted to walk through. So while I wasn't exactly sure that I wanted to be a professor, I was sure that having the doctorate would make it possible for me to do anything that I wanted. Like I'm doctor somebody, and that would just kind of magically do it. But yeah, so being a professor really, I think, emerged probably in my next to last year when I started teaching to help support myself while I was in graduate school, and found that I really loved it and really loved working with students. And so that kind of cemented the path.
Okay, if you could recall, what was your first experience in the classroom like?
Terrifying, actually, because I was still a student. So much like it is here at IUP, when you come in, you get funding, and very often at the university I was at, that involved teaching. So I had a teaching position when I first came in. And the reason I say I didn't decide that I wanted to be a professor until much closer to the end of my career was because I just remember my first teaching experience being kind of overwhelming. It was, I didn't feel like I knew all that much more than the students that I was teaching. I did not necessarily know what I was doing in the classroom because I hadn't been paying attention to my professors that way when I had been in college. And so it really was developing my persona in the classroom that I think took up as much time as anything. And then I was able to step away from it for a couple of years and really focus on other things, my scholarship, for instance, and then came back to it later. And by the time I came back to it, I felt much more comfortable. I think I knew more.
Okay. So you gathering that thing, when you know this is it.
Yeah.
That was when you came back to it.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah. Probably 3 years after the first teaching experience.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. What are your responsibilities as a faculty member?
Wide and varied.
Okay.
And I think that's something that no one prepared me for. Like I saw the charmed life of my professors and I thought, oh, I want to do that. That's pretty cool, right? So once I kind of got on the bandwagon and started paying attention, I was like, somebody's paying them to think and to read and to teach a couple of classes, and then they go home and have glasses of wine and parties, you know.
Right.
So I think that's, yeah, exactly. So wide and varied. So yes, there's teaching, and here at IUP, this is a teaching institution, so the teaching load is 4-4. Not as high as some institutions and a lot higher than others, right? So kind of middle of the pack in that regard, but it is considered a teaching institution. Then there's the scholarship, so maintaining my scholarly identity, doing my research, doing the writing, the travel that might be associated with that. More and more, there's a lot of money that's committed to that because institutions haven't been able to provide as much in terms of travel funding as they once did. So, you know, you're always sort of pulling together as much as you can from your institution and then covering the rest of it. So the scholarship can be pretty significant investment. And then the final piece of your job is service. And that looks very different for different people. For me, it has been my ongoing long-term commitment to the Frederick Douglass Institute and supporting students of color, first generation and low-income students, as they transition into predominantly white institutions, trying to make sure that they have good experiences. And a lot of my community work has also been around diversity issues in the community and making sure that different people have voices and that I'm supporting organizations that are doing important work in the community. It's such a good question. You know, most professions, I think, talk in terms of work-life balance. You know, maybe to the nth degree when you're a faculty member, because those demands are equally important to your professional advancement. So for me, the first 7 years was intense, and I don't think I had much balance. It was learning the institution, learning the students, all of the service that I got called to. I didn't really have a way of deciding what to commit to and what to say no to, so I got pulled into a lot that, you know, had I been a little wiser, I probably would have made some different decisions. But that's the tenure process. So, you know, those first 5 to 7 years, depending on how long it takes for you to go up for tenure, the expectation is that you are putting in insane hours, that you're sort of earning tenure through that time period, and it can be pretty intense. Once I have reached full professor, I have had the benefit of being able to really be more choosy, picky, if you will, about the things that I commit to, and making sure that they really are all things that give me some joy and keep me renewed, because there's a lot about being a professor anywhere, I think, that can be pretty draining. And so, you know, really trying to commit to things that keep me energized has been really important. Yeah. Benefits. So definitely the working with students. It is my passion, it is my pleasure, it is my privilege to be able to work with students in all kinds of different capacities. I really think of it as a blessing to be able to journey with someone as they figure out their own path and as they figure out the educational experiences that are going to help them get there. And sometimes pointing them in directions that maybe they didn't even know they needed to pursue. So sometimes that is part of the job too. So that's the biggest piece of it. The other privileges and joys that I get out of being a professor, I've been fortunate to do a lot of administrative work, and that is actually pretty rewarding to me. I like the fact that it's sort of discreet and you have almost an immediate kind of feedback. The task is done or the outcome is achieved or not, and then you go back and you rework it. So the administrative work has actually been pretty rewarding also in ways that I hadn't anticipated. So that's been a nice surprise. And the other rewarding piece, I think, for me has been really mentoring other faculty as I've become more the senior side of things. But having some of our junior faculty and working with them as they get their feet under them and helping them develop strategies that are going to keep them engaged in the institution long term and feeling healthy and happy, helping them make decisions, not blunder the way that I did my first couple of years, all of those kinds of things.
So you enjoy basically.
I enjoy academic life. All the things that go into that.
Okay. So what are some of the challenges of being a
Oh
professor?
boy. Yeah, the challenges have to do with that insane expectation for the amount of time that you put in at the institution. And I don't know of any institution where that's not the case. Maybe some of the elite institutions, but most of us who are at working class institutions or liberal arts institutions, the institutional demands are huge. And as much time as you give, there are things to do. And sometimes more things to do than there is time. So that's hard. That's really hard.
What is a day? Just walk us through a day in your life.
Start at 8 a.m. Meeting in my office for 30 minutes to meet with my secretary to make sure that the project that she's working on is moving forward, running out to another meeting, grabbing a little lunch, coming back to the office thinking, my goodness, I haven't had a chance to prep for class yet. I really need to get to that. And then a couple of people stop in the office, and I have some emails I need to respond to, and this is not sounding great, is it? A day in the life of a professor. So what I've been trying to do is really block time a little bit better, so I save email until one chunk of the day so that it doesn't consume, because, if you get 50 or 60 emails in a day, and you're trying to respond to all of those, there goes your day.
Right.
So I've been trying to do a little bit better with that. I try to block meetings either early in the day or late in the day. Mm-hmm. And then whatever time is off, that's my prep time. So yeah, but the days are pretty full.
Okay.
The days are pretty full. But I like it that way. It keeps things interesting. Yeah. So it took me a long time to come to my research identity. Like, I didn't think of myself as a researcher. I thought of myself as a teacher, first and foremost. I'm not sure, coming out of dissertation, that I really felt like I had anything else to say.
Okay.
So I was happy to be at an institution where I could have some time to figure that out, that I didn't have to come in and immediately start producing at breakneck speed. I didn't want to be at an institution like that. So, 3 years in, maybe 4 years in, I really started to figure out, I do have something to say. And I became very interested in what were then known as white life novels, and the term that I coined for them was the literature of white engagement. So that's literature that's written by African American authors that's predominantly about white characters or white lives. And I thought there were sort of one or two of these things. Someone gave me a book to read during break, said, hey, take a break, this is a fun read, you'll enjoy it. And it turned out that it was one of those white life novels. And sitting there, when I realized that he was an African American author, the author was Frank Yerby, I said to myself, how many of these things are there? Because I knew of 2, maybe 3. So how many of these things are there? And that sent me on a journey, right? And found out that there are a lot of them. So that experience, when I moved into it and kind of figuring out, there's something here, because I hadn't found anybody writing about it, so my scholarly interest, like, I immediately turned and said, hey, what are people saying about this? Somebody has to have noticed this. This is amazing. And there wasn't anything. Mm-hmm. And so that really kind of signaled to me that maybe it was work that I could do, but I didn't know what to do. So I started teaching them. That's actually how they connected for me. I was really interested in what I saw happening in a couple of them. And as I started to read more and more of them, I was like, wait, I see some themes. I see some possibilities. I wonder what students would say about these things. So I taught a class before I started a book. And teaching the class really helped me to figure out what I wanted to say about them. We had some great conversations that first year. It was bumpy, I was figuring it out. I didn't have it, it wasn't like I was coming out of a research place and then sharing it with the class. It was the other way around. So those two are intimately connected for me. Now, research is such an integral part of my identity that I can't imagine doing the job without it. Like, I think I would die. I think I wouldn't be able to continue because there's so much of the other stuff is just sort of, it's the stuff that you have to do.
Right.
But the research is an escape. It is the beautiful place.
It's the passion.
It is. It is.
When you talk about it, you just light up.
Yeah.
The research.
Yes. The first book, my first book was The Souls of White Folk, and I have these wonderful memories of, because I didn't know how to write a book. I mean, that was the other thing. I was terrified. I had to learn that process. Okay. So as I was learning that process, I would write for 15 minutes, and then I felt like I had to run out of the room. I was so anxious. I didn't know if I was doing it right. I didn't know if what I was saying was right. I didn't know if I had the vision for it. I didn't know if I could do it. And I would go out in my garden, and I would spend an hour out there. So 15 minutes at the desk and an hour out in the garden. But I came to understand that I was really kind of planting the seeds, working the land, planting, even pulling the weeds. All of it was part of the process of getting those ideas to germinate, to grow, nurturing them. It was the quiet time that I needed to do the thinking and the reflection, and to allow those things, those words, those ideas to come to me.
So, is the garden an intricate part now of your writing process?
Sometimes,
okay.
Depending on how complex the thing is.
Okay.
Yes, sometimes. So the book that I just recently finished up, I didn't do a lot of time in the garden. It was a hot summer. That was one thing when I was working on that one. But I didn't need the garden in the same way. It's a collection of short stories by Frankie Irby, and that collection, I was mostly editing his work and writing an introduction. I didn't find I needed to be out in the garden for that in the same kind of way. When I was doing the heavy theoretical work and pulling all of that disparate stuff together, that's when I needed to be out there planting. So, yeah.
So what is the title of your latest?
The Short Stories of Frankie Irby is the name of it. Yeah, it should be out 2020.
2020.
Yep.
Okay, we'll have to look for that. So talk to me a little bit about how professors get promoted or advanced in their careers at this institution.
Yeah. So it's here at IUP we have a 5-year tenure clock. So your first 5 years you come in as an assistant professor, and you have 5 years to earn tenure. During that period of time, you have to have accomplished well in 2 of the 3 areas that you get evaluated in. So that would be teaching, research, and scholarship. So most people put a lot of time into their teaching because we are a teaching institution. I don't think you can get tenure here without being a decent teacher. And then the other area that most people work on, first of all, is scholarship, right? Because we come out of graduate programs that have really promoted that. And so we kind of continue that. And then after another period of 7 years, you can go up for associate professor, and then after that you can go up for full professor. There's some things that can accelerate that, have a shorter period of time in between the ranks, things like that. But generally it takes about 15 years to get to full professor if you are successful the first time that you apply for each. Yeah.
Okay, so as we move forward, this has been quite an interesting conversation that we're having here.
I hope you're thinking, I definitely want to do that, as opposed to, oh my gosh, I'm running from that.
No, I'm not running. I am definitely not running toward it.
That's good.
Not
That's good.
Away from it.
I think that in the academy, those of us who teach have sort of been working under the premise that everybody knew what we were doing. Because we're in front of the classroom, right? How could you not know what I'm doing? And if my experience is any indication, you could go through 4 years and never ask the question, what does my professor do? that was me. Now, granted, I was a first generation student, so maybe others had deeper or different experiences that would have prepared them, but I had no idea. So I thought that, grading a few papers, that homework that they assigned us, they had to do that, they taught, and that was it. So I think that the misperceptions are because we haven't done a great job talking about our profession and what all is involved in being a faculty member at a university. So students don't know, and certainly the broader public doesn't know, especially if they haven't had college experience themselves. And so it looks like a pretty cushy kind of job, tenure, security for life, some decent pay compared to some of the other jobs that you could have. And I think that people don't know to ask. They don't know that they don't know. And so why would I ask? It looks like I can see what you're doing, right? So I think the misperceptions come from people extrapolating from what they see. But all the stuff that's happening outside of the classroom, the hours and hours in addition to the classroom, none of that gets seen. And so I think people just don't know.
I agree with you on that. You just, as a student, sitting in the classroom, looking at the professor, you see something different than what the actual life is of the professor. Right. Because when I look at you, you see something totally different. You see, summer's off, holidays off.
Yeah.
You see these things, and you don't understand that there's so much more about that person.
Right.
That's standing in front of that classroom teaching.
Right. And I think building on what you're saying, I think a lot of our understanding of what a professor does comes from the fact that most of us have a through high school kind of experience. Right. And that also is a misperception, but it looks very much like, it's just they do it at a different level, but I know what they do, and they finish up at 3 o'clock, and they have breaks, and they don't teach during the summer, so that must be what it means to be a faculty member, except you get paid a little better.
Right. You worked a little harder.
Exactly. Absolutely. The biggest reason is because the students who are showing up at our universities are more diverse than ever. Mm-hmm. And if they do not see people who look like them in the classroom, who have at least some shared experiences or understanding of cultural backgrounds and heritages, different teaching styles, then we lose them. We lose them because they don't feel inspired, they don't feel valued, they don't feel seen. And I'm not saying that having diverse faculty in the classroom fixes all of it, but the problems are only exacerbated if we don't have it, right? So I think that the first reason that it's important is because the students we're serving need us to be in the classroom. And I think institutionally, the difference that it makes to have a diverse faculty is pretty significant. The different conversations that happen, the different perspectives, the ways in which the challenges of our modern day get addressed are enhanced when you have a diverse faculty as opposed to a faculty who is majority one identity, right? Because when that racial incident happens on campus, or when that homophobic incident happens on campus, or if you don't have people who can help you to think from that vantage point about how to address those issues, then it's likely to get worse before it gets better, because you don't know what you're missing and you just kind of stumble into things. So that's another reason why I think it's really important.
So diversity is definitely needed.
Yes.
Is there anything I did not ask you that you would like to add?
You've asked some great questions. I think I'm pretty good. I think one of the last things that I would say is that initiatives like this, I believe, really can make a difference, because if my claim is true, that the reason that students of color, first generation, low income students, other minoritized groups don't consider professor is because they don't really understand what it is. Perhaps we don't have backgrounds that have introduced us to all the ins and outs, right? If the reason that more people don't consider it is simply because they haven't been exposed to it in a way that makes it attractive or appealing, then I think this kind of an interview, an opportunity to talk, really can make a difference for people, both in terms of, just providing more information, but also in changing the mindset, because for all of the challenges, I think this is the best job in the world. I wouldn't trade it for anything.